Welcome to Bubba's Palace once again. First of all, I'd like to start off by thanking each and every one of you guys. This is kind of an exclusive. Only you guys are getting this video right now that are on my September 11th through the 18th 7-day trip on the Independence. I'd like to thank each and every one of you guys for coming out with us and fishing with us again. We had a ball last year, and what I wanted to do was something a little different this year. What I wanted to do was to help you guys with the suggested tackle list that we're going to be having on this trip. And I want to help you guys, give you a little bit more tips, because I was watching Bryan last year. Little B was killing the Wahoo. So I figured, you know what? Let's see what he's doing so we can see if we can kill him like he did. So a lot of you guys did really well last year, and like I say, this is just to help some of the others and give you a little bit different idea. We're going to talk about several things that we're going to do on this trip. Some from things to bring, to enjoy, to relax yourself with, to suggested tackle, to rods, reels, line, Wahoo bombs, jigs. You know the difference. You know, why would you fish a Wahoo bomb versus fishing a jig? You know, yo-yo and surface iron, things like that for the yellowtail. So we're just gonna get into a bunch of different things, and I know a lot of you guys already know this, but there's a few that don't. And you know, the beautiful thing about this is that we can always learn, and I learn from each and every one of you guys every time we go out and we go fishing. So I just thought it would be kind of neat to kind of put all the things that we've been doing. We've been with this bunch for a while, and we all have our specialties. You know, so I figured we can put it all together and see if everybody can do really well on this next trip we have coming up September the 11th with Matt and the gang on the Indy, who always work hard for us, and they always make sure that we have a good time, make sure we eat good, and boy, we catch the fish. So I can't wait to get started in giving you guys these tips. So some of the things I like to bring when I go on a long range trip, of course, you're going to always have some reading material because we're going to always be doing some traveling. So you need to find you a good book, a nice little book that you want to read, or sometimes I read the Western Outdoor News to see how late I really am when it comes to fishing. But there's things like that you want to bring. I like music, so what I'll do is bring my iPad or my iPod. Or, you know, nowadays they have all kinds of ways you can carry your music. And I just sit there with my headphones on and I just kind of, you know, listen to some nice music in the evening time or at night to relax. They have DVD players on the boat, and you can bring your movies and you can sit in the galley and you can watch movies. You know, there's a lot of different things that I like to do when I'm out there. And one of the main things for me is the nice lawn chair sitting on the back deck and relaxing as we're traveling and just kind of chatting around with the guys and catching up with everybody to see how everybody's been and how the families have been and how we're all dealing with this COVID-19 and making sure that we're all good. So it's always good conversation. And then it's always fun to chat with the captains and the deckhands to find out exactly what are we getting into. What are we going to be doing, you know, in this anticipation of this fishing to try to get our rods and reels set up. So those are some of the things I do to pass the time by. Oh, and I know some of you guys are saying, no way, Bubba, you spend most of your time sleeping. You're right. I do catch up a little bit on some of my sleep when I'm there. Not so much on the 7-day, but on a 14-day or 16-day, yeah, you won't see Bubba for a couple, 2 days. He'll be down in the den, sleeping and enjoying it. One of the things a lot of times people ask, you know, what type of reels do I bring on these types of trips? And I'm going to tell you, I'm not sponsored by anybody. I'm just telling you what I've used in the past, and it works. I love the Avids. I love the Avids for the JX, the MX, the LXs. I love fishing those. When I start to get into the heavier stuff, and when I'm going to 80 pound or above, I go with the Makiras, the Akuma Makiras. I like the 16, I like the 15, the 20, and the 30. I like those reels because the drag systems on them for the big fish is unbelievable. And they're a reel that you can bring right out of the box and you can go catch a 200-pound tuna on it. You don't have to do anything to it, no adjustments to it, nothing like that. And the other reason I like the Avids are, I've probably used my Avid for the last, my Avid's probably, I imagine somewhere around 10 years old. And I have really beat those reels up. I mean, I've put them through everything. I mean, from Costa Rica to Alaska, all the way down south. And those reels continue to work. They have not failed me. They have been just great reels. And I like the wide variety they have, from the narrow to the wide. And I also like the 2 speeds on them. And they're priced right in the market where they're affordable. So that's one of the things that I do like. But I am telling you guys, there's one reel don't be a sleeper on. And that reel is the by Penn. It's the Penn Phantom series. It's probably the most inexpensive 2-speed reel that we can get on the market today. And this reel has been tried and proven. And I'm telling you, for fishing the Wahoo, that Phantom 40 is unbelievable. The gear ratio on that, the power, the torque it has, and dropping it into low gear, it just seems to wind those fish right in. So those are a couple different ideals. I mean, I know there's the Shimanos out there, and the Accurates and things, but that's a little bit out of Bubba's pocketbook. I'm still a working man, you know, but they're all great reels right now. I mean, we have really, really good reels out there, and the reel companies have really stepped up their game, and they're understanding fishing is braid and how important that is. And even in the rod companies, they're realizing the importance of these reels are getting so strong and so good that you're using smaller reels with more drag than you'd had with a bigger reel back in the old days with less drag. So that's one of the things that's good about United Composites, is that we're constantly changing the components. We're constantly changing the materials that we're using to make these rods lighter, stronger, to match these reels of today that we have. So those are some of my choices that I have. I will get into specific models when we talk about specific fishing, when I use a high-speed reel, when doing certain types of fishing, and low-speed reels when I'm doing other types of fishing. So as we talk about the specific species, I will talk about the reels and the rods that I use for those, and why I use those reels and the gear ratios. Now this is the part when you guys look at this table now and you look at all these different reels and you go, Bryan, why do you have so many reels? I have a lot of different reels for a lot of different reasons, and you guys will see that I use a lot of Avids, a lot of Makiras, and I use my Daiwa. The Alexa 400, the series of the Alexa, I really like. This is the HD 400. I can fish anything from yellowtail on this thing down to big calico bass. I'm at Cedros. I fish a straight 80-pound braid, and it works great. So I use it for that. It would handle the bigger fish, like the tuna and things like that, but it doesn't have, as you can see, the line capacity is not very much. So if you get a fish that takes off, you know, a tuna, you might be in a little trouble. But the drags and everything else in the frame, it'll all hold it. But I just don't think you have enough line capacity. But when I'm throwing those 7-inch swim baits down in Cedros for those big bull calicos, this is the reel I want to use. See the big power handle on it? It's the HD, it's the super duty, heavy duty model. And I really, really like this one, right? And you go, but Bryan, we're going on a 7-day trip. Why do I need to take something for calicos? Well, you never know where we may end up. We may end up on the beach. We may end up at Guadalupe. We may end up at San Martin. Who knows? 7 days, we're going to be out there for a long time. And Matt's the kind of captain that we're not getting bit. He's going to go try something. You know, so who knows where we'll end up. So I always end up taking me at least 2 bass setups, just in case I need them. Now, when you guys look over here, you're going to see that I have a bunch of Makiras. I got Makiras all the way from the 15s, the 16s, the 20s, the 30s to the 50s. And I'll take a set like this out on a 7-day trip just in case we do go up for bluefin and we do get into bigger fish. I won't put these reels out until it's said, hey, we're going there. Once we do that, I take my reels out. One of the things about these Makiras, man, that I really, really like is that the drag systems on them are unbelievable, how smooth the drags are. When you talk about drags on reels, there's a couple people out there that you have to give homage to, and one is Shimano. Shimano makes great drags. Their drag systems are so smooth, and they're very, very reliable, and they've been doing it a long time. The other one would have been Cal Sheets. You know, Cal Sheets used to take our reels, and we take those internationals and we send them to him, and we wait for 3 or 4 months, depending on how long it took him to get us to bring them back. And then we come back and we'd have really, really good drags on those. These come out of the box. You don't have to do anything to them but fish them. They have what they call a progressive drag system on them. So you can click them up just a little bit and you put a couple more pounds of drag on when you need it. That is the beauty of these. I have started fishing these probably 7 years ago. I started fishing these. I've always been an avid guy. I love avids. I've had them for years and years and years, and they're very durable. They're very dependable, and I just enjoy using them. And they're priced right. The avids they put them at the right price, and I like them. The reason I transitioned over to the Macairas for the bigger, because I still use the avids for the smaller stuff under 60, 80 pounds. But the reason I went into these Macairas was because everybody knows this guy by the name of David Cho, who is a great tuna fisherman. And he and I were pro staff at the same time. And David telling him, he came over to me one day and he says, "Hey Bubba," he says, "have you tried these Macairas?" And I was like, "No, Dave." I said, "You know what? I'm real happy with my avids." I said, "They've been working very well." And he goes, "Hey, when is your next trip?" And I told him. He gave me 4 of the Macairas to try. He gave me 2 30s and 2 20s. And I want to tell you guys, when I was fishing those reels and the drag and the power and the low gear ratio that they had when you went down to low gear, it was unbelievable, the torque that you could put on these fish, the power that you could put on them. So ever since then, and I said it's about 7 years ago, maybe 8, that I've been pretty much on the big fish, I've been using my Macairas, and I love them. And the 20 series Macaira, this reel here is all you need on a long range trip. You go on a 15-day trip and you're going after the big tuna, or now out here fighting these big bluefin at night and things like that. Guys, do not be undergunned. Grab these big Macairas and go out there and catch a tuna of a lifetime. You guys will look at this table and you'll see, "Hey Bubba, you got so many reels, so many of this and so many of that." And the reason for it, guys, I'm gonna tell you is, all these reels, like the avids, they come in like, this is the Wahoo X, you got the LX, the MX, the JX, and what they are is all different sizes. Some of my reels I like to have a lot of spool, you know, a lot of line, a lot of more torque. Other ones, when I'm casting, I want a little bit, you know, less drag on there when I'm casting. So I use all of them. You'll see on the side over here, you'll see some of the wider spools, right? Versus some of the narrow spools. A lot of these have about the same amount of drag, but I use them for different applications. And when I'm out, and you guys all know that I'll have, like this 7-day trip we going out on, I may have short of 14 rods. And the reason for that is because we get in a hot bite and everything is going, or I think I want to try something, I hate to stop and have to tie something, because sometimes when you do that, the bite is over, right? By the time you go dig in your tackle box, you go grab a jig, or you go buy something, the fish were up on the surface, and the next thing you know, you do all that tying, you tie everything up, and the captain goes, "Okay guys, you know, those fish sunk out here. Let's see if we can get them and find some more." And you go, "Man, I just cut off all my stuff to tie us on, and now I don't have it," right? So I'll have rigs all ready to go, so I can just run into where my rods are, grab a rod, get that cast out, and be one of the first guys in the water, especially on the jig fish when you're fishing. You know, you run into a school of Wahoo, or all of a sudden the yellows come up, busting in the chum line. You'll see us back there casting jigs and things like that. So you always want to kind of have a couple of different rods set up with a couple of different things just in case that happens, so you'll be on top. Now the problem is, and you guys, a lot of you guys who know me, you know when I go, Bubba's got the good old numbering system. A lot of you guys have seen these tags, right? And you know what these tags are? Well, when I'm sitting at home and I'm matching up my rods to my reels, and I say, okay, you know what? This is the setup that I want to have, right? So what I'll do is I'll take this, put this on the reel. So that's number 2, right? The rod that I was going to use, right? I put this on the rod. So what ends up happening is, when I get out there, and like I say, if you got 14, 15 rods, I'm not going to remember where all these reels went. So the quick, easy way is, when I pull my reels out of my reel bag, it's numbered. I look over, all my rods are sitting in my crate. They're numbered. I just grab the rod that has number 2 on it. I know that's the reel. I spent hours deciding on what line I was going to put on there, what type of setup I was going to use that for. And what that does is it cuts down a lot of your time, you know, when you're traveling and things like that. And that way you get the matchups that you really want. You have the combination, because that's really important. If you have 2 reels that you have 40 pound on, but you have one rod that you wanted the 40 pound on, and then you wanted another rod you wanted 50 pound on, or whatever it may be, but you can't remember which one you had matched up. So you end up going out there fishing, and you notice right away when you start fishing, you're not comfortable because that's not the setup that you wanted, right? To avoid that, the thing you want to do is to go ahead and to match your numbers up, and it'll be a lot easier for you. So you'll see these tags. It's just easy, Office Depot, and not very expensive. Just grab these tags, permanent marker, and when you're sitting at home, make sure that you set that up. The other thing I want to show you guys is the finger sleeves. You can get these at Rite Aid. You know, a lot of us use the tape, you know, so we're casting and stuff like that, you know, especially with all this Spectra that we use, all these different braid lines, right? So what I do is I go over and I get these fingertips right here, the finger sleeves. And then you can just put those over your fingers, right? So when you're sitting there and you have the bait and everything, just like you would have the blue tape, you know, the wrap, these are nice. The good thing about these is I can bring them back, I can rinse them out, and they'll be ready to go for tomorrow. So they work really, really well. I know a lot of guys, they see us out there and they go, what are those? Well, they're finger sleeves. And you can get them at Rite Aid. The back it even says on the front too, it says Rite Aid. You just go over and get those, and like I say, the thing that's nice about them is they come in a couple different assorted sizes, you know, but at the end of the day, I can actually wring these out, put them in my box, let them dry, and they're ready to go for the next day. So that was one of the things that I know a lot of people, when they saw, they were asking me what these were, and that's what those are. So those are the finger sleeves. Don't leave home without them. I'm telling you guys, you'll really enjoy them. The other is we're going to need some type of bait rigs. Sabikis, these are the Mustad, these are P-lines. The main thing you want to find out or you want to do on these is that you want to make sure that when you look on here, it says that the main line is 30 pound. That's what you want to do. Just in case you load up with 2 or 3 mackerel, you want to make sure that the line is not going to break on you, because they'll have these things as light as 12 pounds. So when you look, it'll all give it down to you, and it'll tell you your main line is 30 pounds. So you want to make sure that when you get these, when you use these, that you're basically getting the ones at least have a 30 pound on them. They have them heavier, but at least 30 pounds. There's a couple different variety. Owners make some. These are P-line and Mustad. They all have them. Guys talk about hooks. And here again, like I say, you use what is comfortable for you. I'm going to start off, I'm an owner guy. I like a lot of owner hooks. Owner makes a great variety of hooks. They make really good hooks. I like them. When I'm out here on trips like this, there's a couple different styles that I use. The Gorilla hooks, I'll use these. I use ring Gorilla hooks, right? I use ring fly line hooks. When the fish are real finicky and they really don't want to bite nothing heavy and they want that smaller presentation, I'll go to the ring fly line hooks. I'll have those in 2/0, 1/0. The other is just a regular Mutu, just a regular Mutu, which is a lighter wire than a super Mutu. So I'll use these. When we start to go into the bigger fish, the bigger tuna, then I'll go into the super Mutus. They're a little bit thicker, a little bit harder to straighten out the break. So I'll use those. These here on these 4/0 and 5/0, I've caught over 200 pound tuna on these, and they don't even budge. They're a good, strong hook. So I will definitely use those, and these are the same Super Mutus and 5/0. Now, John Grabowski was one of the greatest captains of all time, one of the greatest captains I've ever fished with. He swore by these hooks, and he got me fishing these hooks many years ago. And these are the Mustad, the Hoodlums, 4 times strong. These hooks are unbelievable. They're a J hook. They're not a circle hook, they're a J hook. And I use these a lot. And I use the ring Hoodlums. They have them without the rings, and they have them with the rings. I use a lot of those. I'll use 4, 5s, and 6s of those. Mustad also has a live bait hook. We get into a lot of fish and say that they're going crazy. Well, I use these hooks. These hooks are relatively inexpensive. They're very good hooks. They're very strong hooks. So I'll go into these hooks and I'll blast through these. A lot of people didn't know that Mustad makes a circle hook. They have the Demon, what they call their Demon hook, which is a really, really good hook. It's a lot thinner wire than the Super Mutu, and it's thinner than the regular Mutu also. But a lot of times when those fish are finicky and they don't want that heavy jewelry on them, this is one that you can use to get around that. These hooks are very, very strong. I know they don't look very strong, but they are. Because the first time I started using them, I was questioning myself too. Like, can these hooks really hold a big tuna? And yes, they can. They work great. So typically, this is the type of stuff you'll see out of my tackle box when I'm out as far as my hook selection. These are pretty much my go-to type hooks, especially on a 7-day trip. If we were to go on a 15-day trip or 16-day trip, or we were going down to PV to go fish the bigger tuna, I would be with all the Super Mutus, and I would be with the bigger ring Gorilla hooks, and I would use those for the bigger fish down there. But for this 7-day trip, I don't think I'm gonna need much more than a 5/0 or a 6/0 Super Mutu. So that's what I'll have. I have the Hoodlums. I have the Hoodlums up to a 7/0 J hook. So if we get in a fish mackerel, bigger mackerel, I'll have that hook. So that'll pretty much cover me for everything that we're gonna run into down there. Let's talk about fluorocarbon for a minute. I know a lot of times when you go into the tackle stores and you see just walls and walls and walls of fluorocarbon, and you're trying to figure out which one do I use. Well, I'm gonna tell you, it's a couple things that I do. One of the things is that I use Yozuri Pink, and you'll see it on these reels, right? I'll start off with that. That's probably one of the cheapest fluorocarbons that you can have out there. And I'm telling you, in that blue water, it works. It works very well. If I'm not getting bit and other people around me are getting bit, then I'll go into the Cigar, and I'll go into the Blackwater Premier. I don't use those unless the bite gets real skittish. They're a little bit more pricier, you know, so I'm kind of holding on to it unless I absolutely need it. But the Yozuri is relatively cheap, and it's good fluorocarbon, and it works. So my thing for you is to make sure you have at least 30 all the way up to at least 80-pound fluorocarbon for this trip. Because if we run into some of the bigger yellows off the ridge, or if you want to go dropper loop down at the ridge, I would even drop a loop with 100. I wouldn't have any problems at all dropping a loop with 100. You want to make sure that you have, you know, some good fluorocarbon. And people are like, well, man, if you're dropping down, you know, 200 feet, it's no light down there anyway. But the thing with the fluorocarbon is the abrasion. You know, it doesn't stretch and nick up like the mono does. So you're using it for its strength down there also. So that's one of the reasons that you'll see guys that'll actually, you know, have dropper loops tied, and they'll do them in fluoro. And that's just because of the rocks and banging around there. The fluorocarbon is pretty durable, so it works. So grab whatever fluorocarbon that you need, or whatever fluorocarbon that you feel comfortable with, and make sure you have that on the boat. You're definitely gonna need it. As we talked about earlier when I was talking to you guys and talking about the different types of tips and things that I was gonna try to share with some of you guys, and things that made me successful when I'm out there on these trips. And one of my things I love to throw is the jig. To me, a successful trip is if I don't have to touch bait and I can get the yellows and things to go on the surface iron. That just drives me crazy. I love that sight fishing when you're casting the jig out and you're watching the big yellows come up and they're boiling on your jig, or even if you're yo-yoing them. I just like it if I don't have to touch bait. I think to me I have a little bit more control where that jig goes, if I see the fish boiling, I can cast to them. Whereas bait, I'm kind of at the mercy of the wind and the current. So you'll see me talk a lot about surface iron jigs. And one of the surface iron jigs I throw a lot is, I like throwing the Salis 7X jigs. These jigs right here, I love the way they swim. I haven't had bad ones come out. They pretty much swim. When you get them out of the package, you bring them in, you throw them out, they work. You'll see that I only use a few colors. And these are pretty much the basic colors, right? I like the blue and white. I love the blue and white, but sometimes the mint green, it works too, so I'll use that. But when you look at a lot of different types of jigs and you look at a lot of different colors of jigs, people have a tendency to kind of go overboard. But you get what you have the most confidence in. I've been fishing all over the place, and I'm telling you, there's 3 colors that I stick with. One is blue and white. The other is scrambled egg. And the other one is the Dorado color. I got them big so you guys can see them. But these are the 3 primary colors that I use always, and they always seem to get bit. So I like throwing these first. Now, every once in a while, the bite gets a little tough or something may happen and they want something a little different, then I'll come out and I'll throw these, and I'll throw what they call the mint green, which is the same color, same jig like this without the white. I'll throw this. That has a tendency, especially for yellowtail, within the last, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years, that color's been really, really popular. So you'll notice that those what I just showed you were all surface iron. Now, when it comes to yo-yoing, I have a couple different ones. The Salis 6X Juniors. These are little compact, little jigs. I love yo-yoing these. I yo-yo these on 50-pound test and a high-speed reel. When I say high speed, I'm talking about at least a 6-to-1 reel. I love fishing a 6-to-1 because you can't outswim a yellowtail. A yellowtail, if he wants that bait, he's going to get it. The same thing with a tuna. We don't have a reel fast enough to outwind them, even with the Shimano cranks, the torque cranks, the tranks, I believe it is. Yeah, even with that, and I think that's like a 7.5-to-1. I see a lot of guys using those for Wahoo now. And you still can't outswim that yellowtail. When that yellowtail wants it, he kicks that tail, he can accelerate and catch that jig. So that's why when you're yellowtail fishing, yo-yoing, you want to have at least a 6-to-1 gear ratio on your reel, because that'll definitely help you get more bites. It'll trigger more of a reaction. He'll see that bait swimming out of the zone and he'll want it. And one of the things you want to do when you're yellowtail fishing is don't give up. You know, when you take 2 or 3 winds, a lot of times we winding through winding, and just when you get ready to stop, boom, you get bit. They may not be all the way in the bottom, or the school could be all over the water column. So just wind through until you can locate the area or the depth in which you're constantly getting bit at, and then that's when you can pay attention to make sure that you're focused in that depth. So I will go to a UFO, sorry, not a UFO. I will go to a Sumu 6. If there's a lot of current out there, and say my 5, I'm going down and I got too much of a drift where my 5 is going out like this, I'll go to something heavy. I'll go to a Sumu 6, I'll go to a UFO 6, then I'll drop that down just so I can get down in the bite area where they're at. One of the things you want to look at and know how heavy a jig you are, if you see your line, if you're dropping that jig down and you can't get that 45 and that line keeps coming like this and keeps going and the boat's drifting away and you can't get that 45 to get that angle to stay in the bite zone longer, then you know you need to go to a heavier jig. And the other thing I tell you guys all the time, look around. There's always going to be a couple of guys that are always hooked up. When you see that they're hooked up and you go, oh wow, he's using a bigger jig, maybe I should get down. Maybe they're straight down, he's getting them straight down. I cast it enough to where I can get that 45-degree angle, where I get that 45 coming back to the boat, because that keeps me in the bite zone a lot longer. So I'm in the protective area a lot longer with that 45. When I make those long cast out and I'm dragging down here, and by the time I come back up in, I don't have as much time in what we call the productive zone, where the layer where those fish are. So one of the things you want to make sure is that when you cast out, don't go too far. You can catch the fish. The fish are coming to the boat. We're chumming bait. And you always see some breaking out. Yeah, you always see those. But what you see out breaking out and underneath the boat, it's a lot of fish that are around the boat when we get in these big schools of yellows. So make sure that you don't overcast. Vary your cast until you get bit. Once you get bit, you repeat what you're doing and you'll continue to catch them. When you talk about jigs, here's a company, Z-Bar, has basically taken a lot of the guesswork out of the jigs. You know, typically when you go to a tackle store and you see a wall, there's a wall of jigs. There's all kinds of jigs. And what you'll see is, you'll see a bunch of jig fishermen over there, and they'll all be picking up the jig, and they'll all be looking at the jig, and they're looking at the shoulders of the jig, they're looking at the offset, and they're sitting there. And what we're doing is, we're trying to mimic a jig that we have in our box that we know has the right kick to it, has the right kick. So we're looking at that, and we're trying to remember, okay, was it on this side? How did it look like that? Was it smooth like this? Was it like that? So when we get a jig, we'll know that, hey, you know what? This one's probably gonna kick pretty good because the ones in my box are similar to this, right? Well, Z-Bar has put in the homework for us. What they have done is that they have taken those types of jigs and they've done all the research, and they got the best swimming jigs that they could get, took it back to the machine shop, and this is all machined aluminum. All machined aluminum. And it's done by a CNC machine. So what they can do is once they have the program, they can be consistent. So this jig will look like this jig, will look like this jig, and they'll all swim the same. I haven't thrown these yet, so that's why I have them, because I want to test them out and see what they do. They're beautiful, beautiful jigs. So if that is true with that, then basically it has taken a lot of the guesswork out of, do I have the right jig? Is it kicking right? Is this jig gonna swim? If they've actually done all the work and all the research and all the computer programming, and they can be consistent and putting out the same jig where you can just run it in a tackle store, grab the colors you want, and get out of the tackle store, right? As far as that, that's a beautiful thing. So on our trip, I want some of you guys to come up to me and go, hey man, show me those jigs and let's throw them out. I know like Bryan and Roy and you guys and Jeff, I know a lot of you guys like throwing the iron. So let's try these out and let's see what they do. Let's see how they swim. I'm really, really curious to see if they're gonna swim as well as everybody says they do. I can't say enough about, this is one of our companies also that's affiliated to United Composites, and this is surfaceiron.com. Now, I brought this out on one of my long range trips we had last year, and for you guys who love to crimp, there's absolutely no reason for you not to have one of these. And I'm gonna tell you, Gary over at surfaceiron.com, he's one of these kind of guys that if you give him a product or you give him something, you say, Gary, I needed to do this, or Gary, what is this? Or Gary, do you think that's a good knot? Gary can give you all the research, all the data to back everything that he tells you. What I'm holding in my hands right here, this is golden, unbelievable. And it comes with every kit. And what this kit does, it has this crimper that he's modified. It has all the crimps in here. Here's a crimper. He has a mic where you can mic the line, where you can check it. Everything is labeled. Everything has an alphabet that tells you that relates to here. And one of the things that's the beauty of this is that we all know that 60-pound Genkai, 60-pound Iser, 60-pound Blackwater, they're all not the same diameter, right? So we're sitting there thinking, man, when I crimp this, is this gonna be the right crimp? Because this says it's for 60 pound, but it doesn't always take into account of all the diameters. What Gary has done, and like I tell you, you have to have a lot of time in your hand, you know? And he has went through and done all the research for us. He has everybody's line on here. It has the test. It has the diameter. It tells you what crimp, what settings to set the jaws on. This here is like a brainless crimping kit. I would have all the confidence in the world after going through what Gary's research is and to start crimping. one of the things for me is I always try to tie as many knots as I could tie because I had a lot of confidence in knots. But after using surfaceirons.com, the kit that Gary put together, I'm telling you guys, for a lot of you guys who like to do a lot of crimping, this is the kit that you need to get. And I'm gonna give away one of these on my trip. I'm gonna raffle one of these away. So some lucky individual will be able to say, yeah, Brian, you're right. This thing worked out perfect. It really is good. And I showed a couple of you guys on the last trip. I said, hey, you guys have got to see this crimping kit. And some guys picked them up, and I know that they're happy with them. At surfaceiron.com, not only does Gary do all the crimping and all that kind of stuff, but he makes things like this. This is a weighted squid, glow, with weights in it. And when you look at this, what makes this so unique is, when you look at the hooks that he chooses to do these will handle any of your bluefin that are out there. When you want to come over at the rail in the middle of the night and you want to drop something down, and I fished this on straight, I fished on a straight 200. Okay, I fished it because at night, I don't know why guys go out there in the middle of the night and they want to drop down 60 pound and you have 200, possible 300 pound bluefin around. At night, I try to fish as heavy as I can fish, and I'll drop this right down and let it go. A lot of times it gets held on the sink as it's going down and it's glowing, and when they hit it, there's not anything that's going to keep you like a hard jig or anything like that will keep them hook setting. The hook set is perfect on these. They bite right down on it, and you got them. So one of the things that I tell you guys all the time is, you know, sometimes you fish something a little different, right? Something a little bit more settled. Well, that squid going down is a pretty good bet. The other one is the smaller version of it, right? The smaller version of it. And when you guys are out there and you guys are throwing the flat falls and things like that, and everybody knows that the flat falls work. They do. But you want to throw something a little different? These are fantastic. They work great. You know, one of the things when you wahoo fish and you have so many different lures that you can drag behind, and you know, the boat for wahoo and things like that, and a lot of people have their preference. These are braids, yozuris, and I don't think you guys would like this one much. I don't know, but if I saw a guy who had one like this in his tackle box and I needed to borrow one, I may say, hey, you know what, you might can keep that one. It looks pretty new, pretty fresh. This one looks a little weathered. So what that means to me is that at one day, at one point, at one time, this lure really got hit very good. So if I wasn't looking a little Bryan's box or a little Harris's box and I needed to borrow Murata, I think I would take this one versus taking this one that hasn't proven itself. I think I'd pretty much do this. One of the things good about these are the boat will set them back. The boat will pretty much tell you, you know, how far back behind the wakes they want you to have it. So it's pretty much a no-brainer when you get out there. These are pretty easy to fish. The thing that you want to make sure is that when you get bit and you want to keep that tension on that wahoo, you want to keep him good, you want to keep him nice and good, right? Keep that tension all the way there, because I've seen a lot of guys bring them all the way to the corner of the boat, they give it slack, and this is a small one, but a big heavy one like this, he can shake his head at the last minute and dislodge that hook. So you want to make sure that you keep it tight all the way to the gaff. When they get in the corner and you whine, you just want to keep cranking the thing and cranking it until it's on the gaff. And as soon as it's in the gaff, guys, free spool it. As soon as they got a gaff, free spool, because they wiggle. Sometimes they don't get them good on the gaff. They end up back in the water. But if you have it in free spool, you're able to sometimes recover that fish. So make sure that, and that's on even your big tunas. Once they got the gaffs in him, and they have the gaff, click it in free spool and kind of watch and see what's going on, just in case that fish flips off the gaff. You're already in free spool, you're good, you're able to recover and get your fish back. So the boat will really tell us how far back we want to troll these. The second week, the third week, or wherever they want to do it, they'll put us back. You have to listen to them. They're out there every day. The one thing I want to tell you though is to make sure that all your swivels are good. make sure anytime you Wahoo fishing that your points are good on your hooks. You want to make sure that you have a sharpener on there where you can keep the points nice and sharp. That's a traditional Murata. Now, in the last couple of years, they've come out with a new bait. This is a Nomad. And I'm telling you here, you know, a lot of times things happen and you don't believe it until it actually happens. And you go, no, I've been fishing Muratas forever, right? And then some guy comes on a boat and he has this. And you go, really, what is this? Like a big old Rapala. And you're gonna go Wahoo fishing with it? Well, I'm here to tell you guys that these things are unbelievable. We were out last year and I thought Matt was gonna kill us because we kept hooking up with these. We kept hooking up with them, and I said, it can't be that good. So what we ended up doing was, I said, well, let me have my traditional Murata and we're gonna troll these. You guys remember? We missed a few. So we went back to all Muratas because we said, hey man, you know, something's happening, these skis are coming off or whatever. And so we went back to Muratas. We trolled around for about another 20 minutes. We never got hit. We put these back out and we got bit, stopped the boat. I think one of the reasons is that I don't think we may have been fishing with too tight a drag on some of them and we just pulled the hooks. But what I did, one of mine was, you can see here, I changed my hooks out. A lot of guys say they don't have any problems with these at all coming off or anything like that, but I changed the hooks out on mine. I went to the owner hooks. I went to the owner 9-knots. And so this year, I'm gonna try and see if that's gonna make a difference. I did lose a couple fish last year with the other hooks on them. So I'm gonna try this year and see if that makes a difference. So this is gonna be real interesting, these. But I tell you what, these things, the Wahoo just destroyed them. I mean, they just ate them, and you can see the marks on these. They just ate them left and right. I mean, it was unbelievable. And last year was my first time actually using these, and I really enjoyed them. They really worked well. And there again, once the crew, the captain, and everybody will tell you, you know, hey, look, this is how far we're gonna run them back. They'll tell you what position they want these in. And they really did swim well, and they really worked. So make sure you guys got a couple of these Nomad. To me, last year, the brighter the better. They really worked pretty good on the bright colors. Who knows, this year it could be, you know how that fishing can be. It can change up on you, but I would definitely not leave home without a couple of these Nomads because they definitely stopped the boat last year. Now every year is different. It could be this year they want the Muratas and they don't want those, but it's better to have, as you'll see, I'll be outfitted with both of them. Just in case one works better than the other, I definitely have both of them in my arsenal. So we'll see what that shakes out to be. And everybody knows that nowadays there's no way possible that you can go out and do tuna fishing without these beautiful flat falls. These are what I call the absolute do-nothing lure. You just walk over to the side of the boat, you cast these things down. 90% of the time, you get hit as it's sinking down and fluttering. I remember these things first came out, I was like, what is a flat fall? And they gave me this big hunk of metal, and I'm thinking, this thing will never get bit. What are you guys talking about? Why is everybody going crazy about a flat fall? And man, I took them out, and sure enough, man, we're in the middle of a yellowfin bite. And the captain kept saying, oh, the fish are about 90 to 100 feet down. And walked over to the rail and threw this thing out, and I'm laughing next to the guy next to me. We're talking, and I says, man, I don't know what this thing is. I have no idea what they're gonna, and next thing you know, my line just kept swimming off. And I said, well, I know I hit the bottom, you know what I mean? Because it just stopped, and then it just started going. I said, okay, something's on there, wound down, and sure enough, man, and we started catching them, and that flat fall was just getting big, and I'm a little stubborn, so I said, okay, let me try something else, and didn't work as well, jumped back on the flat fall. First cast back out on the flat fall, got another one. One of the things that they're doing a lot with is that when these boats are sitting on the anchor, or these boats are sitting out at sea on these big bluefin at 1, 2, or 3 o'clock in the morning, a lot of success has been on the flat falls. A lot of guys are catching a lot of these tuna on the flat falls. So I don't know exactly where we're going to be or how we're going to be positioned out on this trip, but I would definitely have my arsenal with a couple of flat falls. I'd get the heavy, the 300s, I get the 250s, the 200s, because you never know how much current and wind you're going to have when we're sitting out there drifting. So, and those, I'm going to tell you guys, if you're fishing those at night, don't fish them anything less than 150. The big ones, anything less than 150. You will see me, I will be straight 200 fluorocarbon to 200-pound braid. There is no in between. At night, I want to fish the heavier stuff I can fish. So if I'm lucky enough to hook that big fish, I have him on the right gear. I have no idea why you see guys at night dropping flat falls, and they're fishing 50, 40-pound tests. I don't get that part. If you don't know by now, if you're sitting on a school of bluefin, whether it's a mixed school, you know, you have a possibility of landing a fish of a lifetime or hooking a fish of a lifetime. So why lessen your ability to land that fish by going out there fishing in the darkness of darkness and you're fishing with 50-pound tests? The odds of you landing one of those big fish, I'm not going to never say it's not going to be done, but I tell you what, it'll be the only one you get that night, because you'll be wore out after 3 or 4 hours of fighting that big fish, and you just pray that he doesn't chew through that mono or he doesn't rub on the other side of the fluorocarbon and break you off. So at night, guys, it's not that often that we get the advantage, and I'm going to tell you, that are 2 times that are definitely in our favor for fishing big tuna. One is on that kite. When you fish that kite, you got all of that stuff is out of the water. All you see is the bait and you see the bottom of the bait. You fish the heaviest stuff that you can fish. And then again, at night, if I'm sitting out there and we're sitting on the anchor, or whether we're drifting, whether with the sea anchor out or whatever it may be, I am going to be throwing anything I throw over that side at night is going to be at least 150 pounds. You won't see me out there throwing 80. You won't see me out there throwing 90. You're going to see 150 on up to 200. Because I know that I have a possibility of landing a very big fish, probably a personal best on a bluefin. I'm not going to mess that opportunity up by fishing something light. So just remember, it's our advantage at night. Let's take full advantage of it, and let's bring some of those big bluefin home with us if we have a chance or an opportunity on this trip, or if you have an opportunity in another trip. You want to make sure that you're fishing heavy enough equipment to land these big fish. This is the reason I got back into saltwater fishing, guys. Randy called me up and says, "Hey Bubba, I need you to come on our squad." He says, "We have some stuff that we're making that's just unbelievable. Some incredible material that we're using, components that they're putting on the rods." And so he says, "Hey, I want you to come by, get a couple of rods, and go back out and start fishing in the ocean." And I was hee-hawing around. You know, I've been chasing these bass for a long time. I've been having a good time doing all this freshwater tournament bass fishing. And then Randy finally got my attention. He says, "Come down to the shop. I want to show you something." I went into his shop, and he showed me these rods. And for a stock rod, for a rod that is, I'm telling you, that is a production rod. When you guys, I'm gonna run these up close so you guys can see them. This is the Tilefish Junior, this RGP. The material that he's using in this to make this thing so light and so strong, it is unbelievable. This rod here, I'll use this rod as a nice bait stick. You know, it'll work pretty good for, you know, like a 30-pound bait stick. It'll work really well for that. I'll use that for that. They also have the big brother to this, which is the Tilefish, not the Junior, the regular Tilefish. And this here is their 100% graphite goose rod. These things are so powerful, you wouldn't believe how strong these rods are. So this here is a nice 40-pound stick. I'll use this for yo-yoing. I'll use this for throwing my bombs, the smaller bombs. I'll use it for that. And I'll also use this to fish mackerel. When I'm gonna fish live mackerel, this stick is great for doing that. So this here, I mean, when you guys look at these rods, man, and you see how beautiful these rods are, it is unbelievable how good these rods are. I'm gonna get into it and I'll start talking to you guys about all the different materials and all that kind of stuff, because what I wanna do is I wanna make sure that I'm saying everything right. So when I do that, I'm gonna have a segment with one of the guys, probably Johnny, from inside the shop that does all the cutting and all of that, so he can explain all the different types of materials that we use on these rods and things like that. So I'm gonna have him in an episode where he's gonna come out and we're gonna strictly have a rod day, and he's gonna break down each one of the series rods and explain them to you guys, what the materials are made of, what guides are all on. I am just a field guy. I just go out, grab the rods, fish them, come back and say, I needed to do this, this, that. All the different intricacies of that rod, as far as all the materials and all the epoxies and all of that, the guides, the size of the guides, where do you place the guides, the real, man, I leave that to the professionals. They're good at what they do, and I do what I do. And it is, I go out and I catch those fish and I come back, I give them a report. But I'm gonna tell you guys a couple of my favorites that I like, that it's a must have. Randy showed me the Del Mar. It's the 900. This rod right here, and it was amazing. Randy handed me this and said, Bubba, this is our new jig stick. And I looked at Randy and I said, Randy, I don't really get this part. I'm like, you know, you're a great rod designer, but Randy, this rod here, I don't see much of a bend. I don't see much of nothing. The rod is very light. And if you guys all know, most of the rods that we've been fishing are been a lot thicker diameter, a lot bigger. I'm not gonna name any of those rods, but we all know what those rods were. So when you tell somebody that this rod's gonna do what those other rods do, you're a little leery about it, right? And I was like, well, Randy, he says, Bubba, I'm just telling you. And I looked on here and it was a 30 to 60 rating. And I'm thinking, you know, Randy's a great rod designer, but maybe he kind of missed the boat on this one. So he told me, he says, hey, take the rod to Cedros. We were doing the ponga fishing at Cedros. He said, take the rod, throw the surface iron, come back and tell me how you feel. I said, okay. So we loaded up the rods, took off, went down to Cedros, and we got into a great yellowtail bite. We got into that 20 to 35 pound fish, and they were pulling. And you know, we were fishing those in the kelp. I go casting this rod out. I hooked one, and I could not believe the bend in this rod. It was unbelievable. The pull power that this rod had. When this fish was digging and trying to get in the kelp, this 9-foot rod would shut off and bring that yellowtail coming right back up. He would dig, the rod would load, and the rod would just bring it back. The recoil of the rod wanted to come back. It wanted to come back. Needless to say, we spanked the yellows. I mean, it was unbelievable yellowtail fishing. And when I came back to the shop, I had to bow down to the king and I had to tell him, I said, you know what, Randy, you were right. I says, man, this rod is unbelievable. There was no way I was gonna believe that this rod would do what you said it did. As small diameter it was, as light as it was, but the backbone in this rod was unbelievable. And Randy says to me, Bubba, don't worry about that. I says, what? He says, on your next trip, on your 7-day trip, he says, I want you to take this rod. He said, Bubba, if you got excited about the Del Mar, he says, when I get ready to lay in your hand, it's gonna blow you away. And I said, Randy, there's no way possible you could make this rod any better. Then he handed me the E9. Oh my God. When he handed me this rod and we pulled on this rod and I yanked on this rod and I pulled, and he told me what they put in it, the woven and stuff like that. And I can tell you, I'm not gonna quote all the material because, to be honest with you, I'm still trying to figure out some of the stuff that they're putting in these rods because he keeps changing them up and he's making them bigger, better, stronger. So he tells me, hey, go take this out. He said, you're gonna love this E9. I said, Randy, I said, the Del Mar is all I needed. He says, I understand, and the Del Mar is great. He said, don't get me wrong. He says, but I want you to fish this too. I took this out, and boy, oh boy, the only 2 jig sticks I need is the Del Mar, the 900, and the 9E. It is unbelievable that something of this small diameter and something, I mean, I wish you guys could feel how light this is. Something is light and small diameter and so strong. It is unbelievable how he's figured out all the different materials that he's blended together to get this rod to shut off. There's not a flat spot in this rod. This rod bends perfectly, shuts off, and I'm telling you, for a 9-foot rod, it has a lot of lift, a lot of lift. And I'm telling you guys, I'm throwing this with the Wahoo X narrow with 60 pound for my surface irons, because I'm one of those kind of guys that if you bite my surface iron, I don't want you to get your head down. I'm trying to skip you back to the boat, because once you get down, now the work starts. But if he happens to get down on these rods, it's a lot easier. This rod shuts off, gives you the lift, and you're able to whoop that yellowtail and keep him out of the rocks. So this is, I couldn't believe it when he came out with the E9. What a great, great rod. So when I go out on this trip, I'll have a lot of duplicates rods. I'll have the Towelfish Juniors. I'll have the Terminators, the Predator. I want to tell you guys about this Predator for my Wahoo fishing. It is unbelievable. This is an RGP 76 Predator. You know, one of the problems with Wahoo fishing, especially when you throw the bombs, it's hard to get a rod that can load up that bomb and still have enough backbone to drive the hook into it, or to put the raider, drive the raider jig into the side of the Wahoo. With this Predator, he nailed it. This 7'6" rod is the best rod out there for Wahoo. Thumbs down. And I fished a bunch of them. But this Predator, the 76, unbelievable. Throwing the bombs, the way the rod lines up, you can cast the bomb a mile. When you get bit and you're winding, this rod just goes down, and that Wahoo pulls the recoil, and this rod keeps that hook in that Wahoo at all times, man. It is phenomenal to have a 7'6" rod versus a 7-foot versus an 8-foot. This is by far, for me, has been the best Wahoo rod that I've ever put in my hands and had the pleasure of catching Wahoo on, is this Predator. This Predator 76 is unbelievable, guys. And when we get out on the boat, I want some of you guys, you know, that fish the Wahoo a lot, I want you guys to catch a Wahoo on one of these rods. And I want you guys to experience it. I mean, it is unbelievable. It is a really, really good thing. So I'll have a couple of these for the trip. And you cannot get on the boat at all without the Terminator. These Terminators, man, I'm telling you guys, it is a must. You cannot leave home on these 7-day trips and these 5-day trips and 3-day trips, and any time that there's going to be yellowtail or that tuna that's in there, anywhere from 25 to 60, 70 pound tuna, you do not want to leave home without your Terminator. This rod is unbelievable, man. This is probably the closest all-around rod that you can take out, and you can do a lot of things with it. So definitely add this to your arsenal. It's unbelievable. All right, guys, I know we talked about a lot of the little bit heavier stuff. Now I want to get into a little bit more of the finesse. And this is a monster. Now, the beautiful thing about this is that my buddies from 310 Rod Works, Darren Dohe, I took him this blank. And boy, if you could have seen what this blank looks like when I took it to him. And I said, Darren, can you help me out? He said, sure, Bubba, what do you need? I said, Darren, make it beautiful. And those guys over there, man, Darren those guys over there, they took this blank and it looks brand spanking new. They rewrapped it, re-guided it, and I mean, they just did such a wonderful job. And I want to say thank you, Darren over there at 310. What we'd be looking for one day and on our trip, feature trip, is to give away one of your beautiful custom wrap rods. I know a lot of guys would love to see the work that you do. You do a great job. But this is my bait stick. This is my light bait stick here that I'll use. And I just want to let you know, Darren, every time I catch one on this, I'll be thinking about 310 Rod Works. Right out of the Gardena, they're local guys. Darren does a wonderful job. And thank you very much for my beautiful rod, Darren. So that's it, guys. I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of tidbits on, some of the things that I do to get prepared for this trip. I want to make sure that when you go out there that you're not under gun. You want to make sure that you have all the things that you need to have a successful trip, and if the fish are there, that you're able to do the best that you can do and you're prepared. I think to me that's the key of having a successful trip, is take your time before your trip. Lay out all your tackle, lay out everything that you want to take, lay out all your combinations, and you guys will see what I do on mine is I put numbers on my reels, I put numbers on my rods, I do all that kind of stuff. So when I get there and I pair all my equipment up, a lot of you guys are sitting at the top watching me like, there's Bubba. Hey, number 5, number 5. Number 6, number 6. Well, when you have a lot of different setups and you spent the time at home to put them all together, you want to make sure that when you get out on the boat and you're all excited, that you don't mix and match your combinations. You put a little time in to make sure that if I'm fishing the Wahoo, I want these 2 rods or this rod. If I'm fishing yellowtail, I want this rod. I want this reel with that. I want this high-speed reel with that. So the thing that I do to help me out, and you guys will see, and a lot of you guys have been fishing me for years, you'll see Bubba has his little tags on his rods and tags on his reels. So when he open up his reel bag with 10 different reels in it, that he'll know exactly what setups are going to be what. And the other thing you guys want to make sure is when you're out, the best thing that we can do, man, always, and on all our charters that we have, the number one thing for being out there is to have fun, enjoy each other's company, and catch up, catch some fish, eat some food. We're going to have Harris there, so we'll have a full bar. So we'll have some nice nightcaps at the end of the day. After a successful day of fishing, we'll out and have us a little nightcap and watch the sun go down and hold hands and have just a great time like we always do. I'm really looking forward to seeing you guys. I'm looking forward to the camaraderie. I'm looking forward to catching up. I'm looking forward to fish with all my buddies that are on this trip. And once again, thank you guys, and out from the Bubba's Palace.